All right, girls. We're just going to continue on here with chapter 26. I'm going to try and finish it. So there's only two recordings, so that makes it a half hour. So we're going to go through this kind of quickly. So we talked about dry farming. I already told you this. Stay tuned. This will become a problem during the Dust Bowl. Okay, it's like lazy. You don't dig very deep. Shallow cultivation. You don't let the land rest. Use uh, shallow planting methods, and it ends up becoming a problem later. Okay. All right. This frontier thesis thing we're going to go over in class. I have a primary source on that, but basically they think the frontier closes about 1890. Does it literally close? Is it an amusement park? Is it a place that can close? No, it's not. No curtain goes down. It doesn't literally close, but that's when they think that the West is populated enough that it isn't like a new thing anymore. It isn't like, oh, I'm going west. You don't have to be really a pioneer now. It's been the first people have gone and they've kind of tamed the West and settled the area. It's not, there's also a thing called the safety valve theory that, when all else fails in the East, if you try to do a business in the East and it fails, you could always quote unquote go west and, get a homestead and try and make it as a farmer. So they feel like at this point by 1890, it's not a thing anymore. Can you go west? Yes, but they think it's populated enough that it's not like a newfangled thing and you're no longer like a pioneer. Okay. All right. So Oklahoma, a lot of states apply for statehood during this time. People are going to apply for statehood as they get the population that they need. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. And one example of people rushing too quickly to try and get somewhere is Oklahoma is called the Sooner State because a lot of people were actually pushing into Native American territory really quickly, trying to get Oklahoma admitted as a state so that it would have enough population. Okay, and this is like a pioneer woman. I know I always joke around and talk about Little House on the Prairie, but if you've ever seen Little House on the Prairie, one of the things about being a pioneer and going west, being a homesteader's wife, is it's a very lonely life for women. It's hard a lot of times because you notice there's not a lot of trees, there's not a lot of lumber out on the prairie, out in the plains area. So men would often have to go off either hunting or looking for timber or supplies or whatever, or they might have to take a job doing something for a while. And women are often alone, and it's scary. There's wild animals. There's natives, there's things that you really have to hold the fort down and be strong. It's really for people who are gritty and have a lot of courage. Being a pioneer is just that. You're the first person in a place where other people really haven't been. So it's hard work, and women are to be, we always want to look at the role of women somewhere. And out in the West, women had a life that was hard. It wasn't for the weak of heart, and they worked really hard doing all the household chores, and a lot of times they had to pitch in and do the farming too to help their husbands, or if their husbands were absent or were killed or whatever. So it's a hard life. But that's what makes America. That's what makes people determined. And the immigrants had it hard on the East Coast. African Americans had it hard, certainly in the South. People in the West had it hard. Native Americans had it hard. Everybody has a struggle. Some, like I say, are struggling for civil rights, and that's a major problem. But anywhere in the country, it wasn't an easy life, really. It was, maybe if you're Rockefeller's wife or something like that, it might be easy. But other than that, people are working really hard building the country. So that's again the frontier here. So this is where they think the frontier, the West begins here. Okay. Anyway, all right. Okay, this is what I already said. Okay. Mountain Police. This is Siberia. That's just some side story. So the mechanization of farming. This happened before, we said, with the market revolution, the first industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution is that much bigger, and farming does in fact become an industry. And it's hard for the farmer. You have to have capital, and you have to have money to be able to buy these tractors and these reapers and all of this newfangled equipment in order to keep up. So the little guy can be pushed out very easily if he can't keep up. It's going to push out so much foodstuffs that it's almost like they're grain factories. So a lot of people are going to concentrate on cash crops, which we know are fine. But when you only do one crop and something bad happens, sometimes that can become problematic. We saw that in the South with the cotton. Okay, if you just put all your eggs in one basket, sometimes that can become a problem as well. All right, that's mechanized harvesting. Um, This is what I was saying, okay? This can become a problem if your whole livelihood depends on the price of one thing. So say that if one year the price of wheat plummets because there's so many wheat farmers, then you could put yourself in a bad position. If there's some kind of a virus or an insect that attacks your crop, that could become a problem. So it's kind of risky sometimes when you have a single product. Um, Okay. Deflation happens because there's so much of something in the marketplace. It's like flooding the marketplace. It's simple economics, supply and demand. Deflation causes a problem, and a lot of farmers want to inflate the prices of their product. They want to cause inflation within the economy. They also want to increase the money supply by adding silver to the money supply. There's going to be a lot of foreclosures. Farmers are really struggling, and of course, this leads to the populist movement. Okay. When we did talk about this, but girls, this is important here. In the Gilded Age, I told you there were trusts for every industry, and a trust is a monopoly. So the seed trust, so the guys who sold the seed to the farmers, there was one guy who had the market cornered, and the price was jacked up. There's Barbed wire was also a newfangled thing during this time period. And the barbed wire trust was something that was hard to deal with too. Fertilizer trust, or railroad, all those people are making life for the farmer very difficult. So they start to organize here during this time period, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, sorry for the interruption. People coming in and out. You can't get anything done. Okay, so we were talking about the farmers. So the farmers are going to organize because of all the reasons we said that they're being violated by all of these trusts. Okay, and every part of the farming industry has also a trust. You know, the guy who's got the market corner, the railroad is the worst. The railroad is really gouging them and making it hard for them to make a good living because they're charging so much for the farmer, and the smaller the farmer, the worse they gouge him on the price. Okay. These are African Americans who migrated north and had a little sod house in Nebraska. Some African Americans after the Civil War did go north in an exodus. And then we'll see during World War I, it's the great migration of African Americans to work in the factories in the North when the white soldiers go to war. African American soldiers certainly go to war too, but there's such a large number that leave the big cities in the North during World War I that it's called the Great Migration. So this isn't that. This is a little bit before that. This is 1887. So they left probably after the Civil War. Okay, well, actually, what does this say? These two brothers had their families had escaped from Canada. Oh, all right. But after the Civil War, a lot of people did leave. Okay, all right. So, girls, a granger is a farmer. If you see the word grange, that means a farmer. So the National Grange, or the patrons of husbandry. Husbandry is like farming. They organize. So there's two different farmers groups. One is the Grange, and the National Grange really was more of a social organization. If you think about farmers, they live so far away from each other. If you own a big farm, your closest neighbor is pretty far away sometimes. So it's a lonely, like I said, it can be a lonely, grueling, gritty life. And the Grange, the purpose was to kind of get together and make their lives a little bit easier, commiserate or whatever, and slowly it evolved into sort of a co-op. And that means like, okay, the price of seed is so much. If we get together and buy it together, maybe we can get a better price. Okay, so it was more social and economic, where the other group we're going to talk about is more political. Okay, some of the Grangers do get involved in politics, but um, also too, the Greenback Labor Party was a group of workers that moved together. So you see people kind of being, you know, joining together with people like them to try and have a voice where they feel that they need some support. Okay, and this is a famous broadside that you see. They call it a poster. Sometimes they call it a broadside. This is from 1875. Um, so the farmer's point of view is, okay, great. You know, like this guy is a soldier. I fight for you all. This guy's a minister. I preach for you all. I'm a sailor. I sail for everyone. You know, this guy's a druggist. Maybe is that a banker? Everybody, you know, is serving the public, but everybody eats. No matter what you do, everybody eats. So the farmer's kind of saying, okay, my job trumps all of these jobs because, and look, it's the 100-year anniversary of the United States, 1776 to 1876. For the last 100 years, I'm the guy feeding all you people. So, you know, that kind of trumps everything else according to the farmer. So don't forget, you know, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Think about the farmer. Okay, so all this leads us. So the other thing, the other group, so one is the National Grange, the other one is the Farmers Alliance. The Farmers Alliance is going to be more political. They do, you know, buy together. They do form co-ops too. They're trying to kind of break down the hold that the railroad has on them. Okay, and they made the same mistake as the populist in that they don't include. They're not as inclusive with African Americans. So the African Americans start their own group. As we talked about, that happens with everything. And their struggle is that plus that for civil rights. So eventually the Populist Party grows out of the Farmers Alliance. This is why I say the Farmers Alliance is more political than the National Grange. The National Grange was more social and economic. The Farmers Alliance evolves into kind of, you know, gives birth to, in a way, the People's Party, also known as the Populist Party. And this, guys, if you don't know the agenda of the Populist Party by now, I'm sure you do because it's on the last test. We talked about how you really had to know about the Populist Party. So, nationalization of railroads, telephones, telegraph, a graduated income tax, which later becomes the 16th Amendment in the Progressive era, new federal sub-treasury, and harvest. Oh, that doesn't happen. This part here, that was an idea that the government would control the harvest and keep extra grain, hold it so the price doesn't go down in separate place, and then put it into the market when the time's right. That ends up not happening. I think they do dabble with that a little bit during the New Deal after the Great Depression, but it doesn't become a federal law or anything like that. But the nationalization of railroads and all those things, the graduated income tax definitely happens in the Progressive era. That's the 16th Amendment. The nationalization of railroads, telephones, and telegraphs, it doesn't become nationalized, but the federal government does start to oversee that stuff eventually. And they want the unlimited coinage of silver. That just means adding silver to the money supply, okay, not just gold, getting off the gold standard. Okay, that's Mary Lease, who spoke out for farmers. Coxey's army, Jacob Coxey was a guy who led a group of marchers on Washington, hoping that the government would get more involved in what was going on and setting up a public works program that would create jobs. Eugene Debs, we're going to talk about a lot. He ends up being sort of a socialist and speaks out during World War I and actually gets arrested for speaking his mind. But he tries to get involved in the Pullman strike. He's involved early on the Pullman strike. We talked about how that's a company town. George Pullman owned this small town outside of Chicago, and he owned a company that made railway cars, and it was so big that he ended up owning like the whole town, and people lived there, and he would cut their wages but not change the rent, and the rent was coming out of their pay. and there's a company store, a company bank, and the owner of the business owns all of that. So company town was kind of a scary thing. And as is typical